Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here for another exciting podcast with some of my favorite people. Today's main focus is really around the hotel industry and commercial mortgages, and I think I have two guys that are unbelievable in those disciplines. So first of all, I want to introduce Ken Greene, dear friend of mine.
Hi, George.
Ken is known as he's better known in Canada for he revitalized the entire Delta Hotel stream, and so the hotel that you see downtown right by the Sky Dome now, Ken did all that. He did all the rebranding. He got rid of that old Delta Chelsea hotel thing that was like it was like historic now, right? Yep. Basically falling apart. So Ken was all there. Most recently, he was at the president of Radisson Hotels. They're probably the largest hotel group in the world right now. And so Ken was the president there. And I'm honored to have him here today to discuss, what's happening on the hotel front. And then we have Mark Hart here, another friend of mine that I love very much. And he's been around for a long time. I know for those of you in the broker industry, Mark's been around. He's an icon too. And he specializes in commercial mortgages across Canada, and he's well known. He's a former executive at CIBC who ran the commercial mortgage division. And so lots of experience here. And I'm very much looking forward to having a great discussion with these guys and sharing some of their knowledge with you. So that said, we can't help but talk about COVID-19 and the impact it's had. I know it's been a while now and everybody's pretty well sick of hearing about it. But on March 15th in Canada, this lockdown came down and it created a lot of panic and stuff. Just on a personal front, how has it impacted you guys? We'll start with Ken.
Well, it impacted me from the extent that I couldn't see my family for almost 100 days. So I was a permanent resident up here. I'm no longer, but my family is, and because I was working out of the States, and went back down to the States, and then the crisis hit, and I was not allowed across the border until just about a month and a half ago. So personally, it's been quite an adventure to be alone without your family for that long, and so puts things in perspective, certainly.
Mark,
it's interesting. We'll get into it a little bit more, but in terms of our normal day-to-day business, it hasn't really changed from a process perspective. A lot of times I work from the home, so home office hasn't really been a big shift. We have a formal office in Oakville, but I primarily work from home, as does the rest of my team, so that hasn't really changed. The volume of business is really ramped up significantly. So from that perspective, that's something I don't necessarily think I would have seen coming in when there's a market dislocation kind of per se, which this has kind of really been. I don't think I would have seen the volume have ticked up quite this much.
Yeah. So how has it impacted your guys' family life? I know everybody's like spending a lot more time with the kids, cooking and with the wife, and there's been a lot of positive changes from that perspective from people.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, I've cooked more than I've, in the last 3 months than I've cooked in the last 30 years, and so it's and I think it's not just family; it's reconnecting with people that you've had deep relationships with for decades. But I think things like Zoom and FaceTime and the fact that you're working out of your home for the most part, you're not going into the office, you're not wasting a lot of time traveling, and I was on the road almost every day. Yeah. You have all this discretionary time and to reconnect with people. Yeah, I think has been a wonderful thing. It really, from a family and friends, but also from just a professional network standpoint as well.
Yeah. It's been interesting because normally I would have the house to myself. That ship sailed. Yeah. So now the kids are home. My wife works for a big life insurer. She runs a team of people across Canada. So her desk is upstairs in one of the bedrooms, and she's got her office up there, and I've got a formal office. When we built the house, I've got a formal office that I work in on the main floor. But so everyone's home now. So that's been that dynamic's been a bit of a change. But it's been interesting from the standpoint that a lot of our neighbors, we're all out seeing each other in the neighborhood now because everybody's just there. Everyone's home. So that's been a bit of a different dynamic. And again, we're doing Zoom calls with It's my mom's birthday today, so we did a Zoom call at noon with her, and so on. So just those types of things are just kind of much more prevalent. But it's just, the immediate impact for me is everybody's in the house.
Yeah.
Especially 2 teenagers, right? Which is interesting.
Absolutely.
So,
I myself have cooked. I learned how to cook again during COVID, so it's wonderful. And the wife was very, very surprised that I could cook. And so my kids love it. I started cooking food for them every week. So, from that perspective, it's been wonderful, right?
So you don't cook? You didn't cook before? How'd you get away with that?
I don't know. I use work as an excuse. But I was forced to cook and clean a little bit more and do all the stuff. But it's a great time where we start to understand what balance was, right?
Yeah.
And
we've been taking turns. I have a son that's 21, and he's a great chef.
wow.
And we take we take turns, and the meals have been getting. I mean, we've eaten really well.
Wow, that's good. That's good.
Because of that, we're all competing.
Yeah. But anyways, the next question for you guys. I've noticed that, we're a few months into COVID now. Everybody's gotten kind of used to it. And there's 2 camps, really. The one camp who is really, really scared and cautious. And there's another camp who life goes on as if, this thing didn't even happen. And we're seeing what's happening in the States and stuff. So there's a lot of behavioral changes. It's funny, I was speaking to a good friend of mine, and he works in the car business where he does loans. He's one of the biggest loan companies for all the banks here. And he said that it's amazing that cars sales are up 30%. And I'm saying, are people buying cars? They're not even back to work. And he said, it's like pent-up demand. So he said, there's a thing. There's pent-up demand, so people couldn't buy a car because they were all closed. And the other thing, he's saying that a lot of people don't want to start taking public transit when it goes back to work, so they want a car. So there's behavioral changes happening. So my question to you guys, it's a $1 million question I have. Like, these changes, whether you're scared or not, how is it going to impact the hotel industry?
Well, it already has, and it's pretty dramatic. I mean, just on a basic level, in the hotel business, and probably with most commercial real estate, I would think, when we underwrote a hotel, we would say we look at it a 10-year cycle and say, there's going to be 2 to 3 years that are bad, and but you make all your gravy in those 7 years, and you pro forma it that way, you underwrite it that way, and you just need to bake that in. I think COVID is probably that's an extended period of time now. I think this is something that's going to be going on. We're going to be dealing with it in one way or another for the next 24 to 30 months. At least, and the probability is that there'll be another type of virus or something that happens in the next decade or 15 years or so. So maybe some of those underwriting assumptions need to be adjusted and are being adjusted. From an operating perspective, I mean, hey, listen, hotel business is sort of it's funny. I spent 20 years getting rid of exterior corridor properties that you drive up to because nobody wanted to be in those anymore. It was all about getting together and being social and having the social tables and the lobbies and in the bars and encouraging people being social inside a hotel.
Yeah.
Well, with COVID, that's all blown up. I mean, the things that we were doing are totally turned upside down. Now, will some of those designs still be relevant a couple of years down the road? Sure. But today, some of these big box hotels, 20, 30,000 square feet of convention and meeting space, big lobbies, couple of restaurants, well, those hotels are dying. And so how you think about the business is dramatically different. And no one has a crystal ball, so you don't really know. But from an investment perspective, it does change your what you would look at from an investment perspective in a hotel. You might go today, you might be more apt to look at smaller hotels with limited public space. You might even look at these exterior corridor properties again, where people can drive up and feel safe and not have to go into a lobby and interact with people. So it's there's the short term, and then there's the long term, and depending on how big the hotel is versus how small it is, how much F&B, food and beverage space there is, and meeting space that is large or small, changes maybe your investment criteria and your underwriting over the next 10 years.
Right.
You look at those probably differently than you did before.
Oh, okay.
So Mark, like from your perspective, there's so many different types of commercial properties. Like, walk us through what's happening on the commercial.
There are four kind of main food groups, or four main asset classes: multi-res, so apartments, office/medical office, industrial, and retail. Those are kind of the four main, what we kind of affectionately call food groups or asset classes. And for the most part, 3 out of 4 of them are performing well. The one that isn't is retail. If you look at statistical rent collection across Canada, office is performing pretty well, and we can talk a little bit more about office in the mid and longer term. So a lot of the tenants are paying their landlords rent, despite not really so much being in occupancy, but so they're performing well. Multi-res. Again, rent collection is like 95% nationally, not dissimilar to office. And same thing with industrial. So retail is the one that has really been hit the hardest. Just because you get these plazas that were shut down for months, right? They've just been recently allowed to open up again. And so going forward, if you see mom and pa, local fashion-based retail plazas, they're going to struggle to survive, kind of going forward. Grocery and pharma-anchored assets typically will perform well because a lot of consumable stuff. You and I go there all the time to buy things, and where there's banks and those kinds of things. But so retail plazas are struggling quite a bit, and I suspect we're going to see more and more of that. Kind of going forward. So rent collection from some large REITs that own a lot of retail assets, in some cases are as low as 50%. I've seen ranges from 50 to 75% rent collection from some of their tenants. So it's a challenge. And there's one in particular that had, a couple months ago, they had like 50% rent collection on, I forget how many million feet they've got. And that in turn is owned by a big pension fund. Right. So you play that out. What do you do there? Right. Because you got to pay the pension fund their returns, but the business itself isn't making money, and that obviously is not a long-term business model that they're going to subscribe to. So it's going to get interesting in the next little while, particularly in the retail asset class. And a big part of so it's a bit of a double whammy retail, right? Because a lot of us are buying stuff online, so that's been an issue for retailers, and then COVID hits as well. So it's, they're kind of taking it from...
I was going to ask you, because it sort of was a declining model before COVID, and now you just sort of see it being accelerated or
Yeah, it's a challenge. And, so retail is going to continue to have to evolve itself. And so you think about the things that we buy online. So the things that people would otherwise, in yesteryear have gone to the store to buy, they're going to have to change how what their model is, and even restaurants, right? This, heretofore, a lot of us, we'd have our takeout spots that we would go to, right? But now it's like everybody's got takeout. Even high-end restaurants got takeout because they realize, that may be the only way that I survive if this happens again. And I got to pay my rent. I don't want to move because this is the premier location for my brand, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a challenge. It's so everybody that has a retail presence is really having to rethink their model. And kind of go through that thought process. Okay, if this happens again, or we're forced to shut down, can I survive? If I can, how am I going to survive? And what does that business model look like?
And I'd add to just not, if it happens again, what happens when the weather gets colder, right? So we're using restaurants as an example. If COVID is still here, you can't go inside. Well, a lot of these restaurants have been very creative in getting exterior space to sit down with social distancing. They're doing the takeout business as well, but once the winter hits and you've got snow and you can't sit outside, and what do you do? And so I think a lot of the restaurants are trying to rethink what they're going to do over the next couple months versus what they just did now. So it's really it's a double whammy.
It is.
Yeah.
See, it sounds like there's a ton of uncertainty still. That's the scary thing about this thing.
But there's opportunity with uncertainty.
There's opportunity. So here's my next question to you guys. Like, I kind of just mentioned that 50% are really scared, 50% are acting as if it's not. That's going to be huge on our impact of the hotel chains and commercial mortgages. So on the commercial side, do you think people, because of pent-up demand, I know everybody wants to travel. Is everybody just going to get so fed up that they're going to go, what the hell, and they're going to start traveling again? Because I think that's going to happen to a most part, right? What I think maybe might not happen, I'll leave it up to Ken to just give some comments on this, is that the business travel will probably be more hit than the recreational travel. So instead of traveling maybe for every three trips, maybe that business travel is down to 1 in every 3, which to me is down 67%. So I'll let Ken comment on that.
Well, yeah. So I think the Canadians and Canada has done it in a much more thoughtful and responsible way than the U.S. And I say that with great sadness in some respects for my colleagues in the U.S. I think Canada took it very seriously. They shut down. They went through the right protocols, and they've opened things up in a very smart way, and they've retrenched when they've needed to. In the U.S., I think they shut down. But to your point, yeah, I think people were used to being shut down, and they're used to. And I think in many markets in the U.S., they did start to travel as soon as they could.
Right.
Memorial Day was really sort of a disaster, and really started the increase in the U.S. again in warm weather states, Florida probably most notably, but Arizona another one, Texas. But that's not sustainable, and so in the absence of a cure or vaccine, that and of course, even if you got a vaccine, you have to have 80% of the population, 75% of the population worldwide, not just in your state or your country, vaccinated. And most people say the vaccine that comes out next will be maybe 2 shots and only 50% accurate, and be on an annual basis, or maybe even every 3 or 4 months. So you start to do the logistics on that, and we're living with this for some time. So I think really there has to be a global plans that really dictate national plans, and they have to be stuck to, and it has to be done responsibly. But and you got to prevent folks from just saying, "Yeah, I want to go travel. I'm going to go travel." Having said that, I'm in the travel business, and so the best way to get in the travel business is to beat the get the virus down and the transmission rate down to a level, less than 1 person transmitted per person, that magical number, to an extent. Get it and keep it under there, so you can have responsible travel, so people do feel comfortable getting on a plane and traveling. Business travel is dead for probably the next 2 years minimum, and I think that puts a lot of pressure on the airlines, their sustainability. Puts a lot of pressure on hotels because that's their base business. Puts a lot of pressure on businesses that were particularly retail, product-oriented companies that really sold their product at big conferences. Those are dead right now in the water, and so all of those things. For the right, I think so. I think you'll see leisure travel come back, but in a responsible way, and people are going to want to feel safe first and foremost. So leisure will come first, and then it's up to us in the hospitality business to figure out ways to make people feel really comfortable when they get there, and that's rethinking, the whole experience from the time they arrive, the check-in, the interaction with staff. It really goes a lot of the things that we have been striving to achieve over the last 20, 30 years in the hospitality business, and trying to get this great customer face-to-face experience and leverage technology, but not get rid of that intimate experience and welcome experience, is sort of upside down right now, because those are the things that you can't do right now because of the virus.
What does it mean for Vegas? Like places like Vegas.
So Vegas is interesting. Here's an interesting pilot program, right? So Vegas reopened up without masks. Masks are optional. virus started to go up. Now they've dictated masks, right? Now, in fact, they just arrested somebody for refusing to wear their mask in Vegas. But the challenge is that you're indoors.
Yeah.
You got many people in. You can social distance and wear a mask, but your transmission rate indoors is still going to be
higher.
Thing. So it's at risk, and so that may come down to So how do you combat that? Maybe testing, right? So it might be having the right instantaneous testing.
Yes.
It may be getting rid of currency, which is cash, and having going to Instacards, which was, by the way, is illegal in the U.S. Was illegal for years. You couldn't do as a casino. You couldn't take anything but cash into slot machines. So that's a regulation. So there's regulations that have to change, and then there are some technology things that have to change to have better cleanliness. So, but Vegas is gonna. I mean, that's my prediction on Vegas, and I guess people will get mad at me for this, but I will say I think Vegas will have to close down again and rethink. And reopen, and if they do it smartly, I think they can do it. There's a smart way to do it. But
Mark?
Yes, sir.
So
which part? What's your?
So I guess the questions was, I know that was a long answer, but we've got the.
Sorry about that.
No.
So I was saying that there's behavioral change. Is there pent up demand? And there's people who are just going to say, what the heck? I need to go do this. And there's other, so how is that going to impact commercial mortgages? I guess more on the retail front.
Well, if you're looking at it from I'm looking to acquire real estate, so I'll maybe take it your question a couple different ways.
Yeah.
So I'm looking to acquire real estate. So I need some debt capital to acquire that real estate.
Right.
Or if I currently own commercial real estate, I may be looking to refinance it if it's for whatever the reason. So we're seeing a fair amount of people that are sitting in cash and have been sitting in cash for a while, opportunistically looking to buy commercial assets because there's lots of people that are having some issues. Some issues because some tenants aren't paying and they're not getting their cash flow. So they're saying, you know what, I'm out. I'm going to sell this asset and get rid of it, while I can, because who knows what's going to come in the next cycle, the next couple quarters. So there's people out there sitting in cash looking to take advantage of market opportunities. Similarly, there's people that have assets that are still continuing to be rented, or maybe it's owner occupied, maybe they own them, they occupy them themselves. And a bunch of people have all this equity in their commercial assets that they just haven't utilized. So some people seeing those market opportunities and them not necessarily being in hard cash or taking out, refinancing some of those commercial assets to buy other opportunities. So we're seeing a bunch of different things, and even beyond that, some people are looking to refinance right now because rates are so damn cheap. So there are a variety of different reasons, and some of those things will kind of intersect as well. And we're seeing, I'm refinancing a couple of gas stations right now, refinancing a golf course that's under leveraged as well. And even now it's, once the refinance is complete, it's probably only 10% loan to value on the golf course. So we're seeing development loans for developers as well, because that business still isn't going to stop. All those guys have, all those developers, they've got machines that they have to feed ongoing. So, and that's obviously how they make money. So, and some of those guys have land loans. I say guys generically. Some of those folks have land loans that some of that capital's kind of tightened up. Some of the players that are in the land lending market have kind of decided to leave the party and not renew some of those loans. So some developers are actually out scrambling to find a refinance of that land capital, because it's taken longer when the town of Markham, for example, closes down, and people and the town meetings aren't happening for them to get zoning approvals and amendments and all these things done. That impacts a developer and their pro forma that looked a certain way, on day one of the project. All of a sudden, they're not going to get their zoning approvals until Next year, they're going to have to carry, so the cost to carry that land changes completely, and the overall profitability of the project changes. So all these things, and that means it's going to cost more to you, the borrower, once that townhouse project is done. So all these things kind of have kind of flow through impact on what happens. So it's interesting. It's interesting how it's all playing out.
Yeah. I hear a lot of questions regarding office space downtown Toronto, and some people have said to me, George, they're not going to need that space anymore because everybody's going to work from home. And I'm totally against that. I said, the workforce to me is 50% are good, 50% are not so good. People need leadership. And I find that what I've experienced just talking to people through this COVID, of the people working at home, 50%, maybe 40% are working harder than when they were at work. But 60% of the people are just having a great time this summer. So I think that you got to go back to work. And I've talked to a lot of people. They don't like, it's been nice working from home because it's the spring and the summer.
Yep.
But people need interaction, just like kids need interaction. So is that a false belief that office space downtown is going to become, people are not going to want it anymore?
No, on the contrary. So I was on a conference call, and we've been on these conference calls over the last few months, and they will be conducted by some industry publications, industry groups. And on the call, there'll be a good cross-section of real estate owners and some of the big REITs, and they're offering up their opinions. And so, we were on a retail call, we were on an office call, we were on an industrial call. So it was really interesting to get specific market information for that asset class. And so it was interesting sitting on the office call because, kind of intuitively, one might think, to your point, that there would be, declining demand to want to go back to work and not only want to go back to work, but even the need to have all this space. But the opposite actually is going to be the case. So I think, to your point, a lot of people have realized that they actually do want to go back to work. They don't really have the logistical setup to actually want to work. This whole thing has been a really cool exercise, but I'm ready to strangle my kids and my spouse. I'm not me, but I'm just saying.
And they're probably ready to strangle you.
100%. Yeah. More often than not, they're ready to strangle the person that's making that statement. That's right. So, and beyond all that, for people that take the transit in, they've got their GO Train family, right?
Yeah.
And they've got their work family that they go for lunch with 2 or 3 times a week, different group of people. But what was interesting to hear on that office kind of asset call was that the folks that actually own the assets have been in contact with their tenants. These are like major banks and people that have thousands or tens of thousands of employees. And the consensus is that they're not necessarily, they being leadership of the tenants, isn't necessarily enthralled with overall productivity.
Yes.
So productivity, they feel has been down. Plus, they really like that energy that's generated from employees working together and being in a similar space. I think they realize that they're going to have to redo their space and reduce the actual employee density per foot or per floor, et cetera. And they're going to have to deploy some interesting technologies. For example, in elevators, right? You might get, a pad in each of the corners, and you stand on the pad, then the door closes. If there's someone that's not standing on a pad that's beyond, the doors just won't close, right? So they're gonna have to, redo HVAC systems, that purify the air more frequently, and so they're gonna have to make some pretty good capital improvements to buildings.
Floor plans, because we all went to the open floor plans to encourage people being.
It's got to go the other way.
That's got to go back to the other way.
Yeah.
So all that last 5-10 years that we've all done that.
So
it has to be rethought.
Well, exactly. So I think what you're going to see is there's going to be an increased demand for space because of the opening up of the density between where you and I would sit in cubicles before. There was hardly any space. Now there's going to have to be more space, right? So increased demand, and you're going to have to see, and that investment that's going to be required in technology, like for example in elevators and perhaps elsewhere, and in HVAC systems, is going to have to be shared between tenant and an asset owner. So you're going to see the rents go up. So increased demand for office space now and cost per foot. So it's intuitively you would have thought the other way, but actually when you actually sit down and think about it, I guess that kind of does make some sense.
Yeah. So Ken, we heard that's very interesting what you said, Mark, because I believe that, but I hear a lot of people saying it's going to be the opposite. So I'm glad to hear that. So Ken, on the other front, from a hotel side, you got all these rooms, you got all this stuff. Like, what they got to make a lot of changes too.
Well, you do. Really, particularly in the public areas, right? The social spaces. So restaurants so, think about breakfast buffets.
Yeah.
Well,
people running around.
I mean, the whole trend was to go to those, right? Well, you can't do those now, right? You can't have long lines of people up in a small space, sitting, serving up, their own food. That, at least in the short term to midterm, has to be rethought. Big social, the big bars where everybody, the social hubs, and the big tables where, you're encouraging people to sit, that don't know each other, to sit down with each other, the whole work, let me go and sit here and work on my laptop during the day, and then I get to play a little bit, with some drinks and some food later on in the same space with a bunch of people. No. We were trying to create some really fun spaces where people could play in the evening, whether it was ping pong or games. That was all coming back, and that was all being encouraged, and people wanted to do those things. We were putting in one of our brands these big screen cameras where people could touch, and they would get together and they do their pictures, and then those would get out onto, they could put them out onto Instagram and all that type of stuff. All that goes away, and so you got to rethink it. If I was by the way, I mean, if I'm like a restaurant chain, fast food, for instance, if I was McDonald's, you're not going to do the big kids play centers with the balls inside anymore. Well, I mean, you'd almost go to their, almost everything. You would start to think maybe we should start to go to just the express version where it is almost all takeout, and maybe you have some outdoor space where people can, tables outside that people can socially distance. It's outside, it's not indoor. So you just got to rethink it, rethink it all. Yeah.
So next question is that the economic impact of COVID has been unreal. I think the impact has been way more than everybody expected. On every kind of business. You can't run from this. It doesn't discriminate at all. And so my view is that people might become a little more conscious about their spending. So consumer spending, we heard it was always through the roof. People are spending way more than their incomes. They're racking up debt. And after COVID, what I'm hearing is that a lot of people aren't going to spend as much as they used to. And then I'm hearing on the other end, from commercial properties, real estate, everything's getting more expensive. Even my wife works at a dental office. The amount of renovations they had to do. So how are they going to recoup this? It's got to be higher costs. So people are going to have less jobs, less money to spend, and higher costs. What's the impact on our businesses?
Well, the good operators will succeed, and the bad operators will get filtered out at a much quicker rate. And so, I mean, I just hate to say that, but I mean, I think in good times, bad operators, good operators, average operators all succeeded and all could make a nice return on investment. But I think when you see a time like this, people their discretionary income is much more important to them. They want a great experience. It's harder to deliver that experience given the having to wear masks and social distance and all those type of things. So. Again, I think really great operators will come up with innovative, creative ways to for whatever the business is, to create an experience that people welcome, and people will be willing to pay a premium for that, versus and they won't accept a poor experience or an average experience.
No, they won't.
Or maybe we did before. And so in some respects, you don't want to see small businesses or even large businesses go leave, but you do want to see, well-run operations, and as a consumer, you're willing to pay a little bit more for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in our world, if someone owns an asset, for example, and in theory, just call that a business because you're providing an asset and you got a tenant there that's paying you rent. Similarly, if it's well located and it's in good condition and so on, it's like an apartment building, for example. Like vacancy rates in Toronto are still near zero. People are still paying their rent. Like rent collection rates across Canada are probably about 90-95%.
Okay.
So people are still paying rent, right? And people are going to continue to pay rent because they need a place to live, and in many cases they just can't afford it, especially in Canada, right? So that's still going to be there. Again, if you're a retail tenant and you're not getting any business, then that's going to be an issue for you, and you're either going to have to work with your landlord for a deferment or something, or you're going to go out of business, one of the two. And so, so to Ken's point, if you're running a good operation and you're creating demand for your product, and there is market demand for your product, then you'll be around. If not, it's tough to say, but you're going to have to evolve into another business. But certainly in our world, for the most part, the asset classes are performing well, with the exception of retail. And even if you look at the grocery and the pharma anchored assets, for the most part, they're still getting lots of traffic. And we're doing one in Eastern Ontario right now. It's a plaza, and they're expanding. They're actually got some excess land to their plaza, and they're expanding. And they've got a bank in there. And they've got a Loblaws grocery store in there. So the rent roll, the tenant roster is pretty solid. Yeah. So, that's still attracting some interest from the institutions that we're approaching refinance. And so there's still, again, if it makes sense, there's still capital for it. If it doesn't make sense, there's not going to be capital for it, or eventually someone's going to go out of business. That's the long and short of it.
And it's a conundrum because, you don't want to go do something so dramatically different and then find out 2 years from now that, but that worked for the last 2 years, but for the next decade, you just went the wrong way. You went backwards. And so you got to make some, you got to make some hardcore assumptions, and you're not going to be right all the way through on it, but I do think I started talking about, initially about just the underwriting, and how in the hospitality business we always said, geez, you underwrite over a 10-year period and think, hey, 2 or 3 years are going to be bad. And I just think your underwriting has to be a little different now going forward. You got to build four or five bad years into the model, and if it works at that, everything, and it's better. It's all gravy, but there's only a certain amount of capital you can put into changing your business to accommodate and still get a return on investment. So it's a tough one.
Yeah. So I've been I work in the retail space in my business, and I've told people I'm still very bullish on the retail market, but not everywhere in Canada, in certain pockets. So for example, in Toronto, I find that a lot of people kept their jobs. There was no loss of income, but people just started working from home. And in those areas, I've seen the housing market, they're still buying with crazy low rates and stuff. So I'm not going to say the same thing for maybe Alberta, because Alberta has other issues besides COVID. It's got oil issues, it's got other issues, and they were basically almost in a recession before this COVID thing hit, right? So they're not going to be as well off in terms of retail housing as Toronto. So my question to you guys, hotel chains, commercial property, is the values really dependent on geographical location?
Always.
Location.
Absolutely. So it's the same with you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the businesses, the hotels that'll come back first are the ones that are in key locations,
right.
Whether they're resort destination locations, or they're close to downtowns, or bigger. Those are the places that will definitely come back first. But again, they have to appeal to the consumer in a very safe way. But yeah, it's always location. But I don't see a lot of transactions on the hotel side quite yet. There's a lot of discussions out there, and there's a lot of big portfolios. Some pension funds, some REITs, that own big portfolios, and then some of the small players, they're all hurting right now. They're not making money. They're at 25 or 30, 40% occupancy. They're not making a dime until they hit 65% occupancy.
Wow.
And so they're all looking at certain rejigging their portfolio and what assets should stay and what should go. But the bid ask is just not.
Big,
There's
yeah.
such a divergence in bid and ask right now because there is government, there is access to government money, depending on where you're at, whether U.S., Canada. The lenders are playing ball right now to a certain extent, but that has a lifespan, and so 3 months, 6 months from now, you might see a lot of transactions out there. It'll be interesting.
Yep.
Location.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's critical in our business.
Yeah.
You look at the price of land in downtown Toronto relative to in the burbs. And although having said that, now if you had ever told me you'd end up with a high-rise building in the suburbs 20 years ago,
Oh, yeah.
except maybe like Mississauga had
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of density there, but you would have told me we'd have had a high-rise building in Main Street Markham. Crazy.
Yeah,
There's no
yeah.
way, it's not going to work.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
guess what?
It's here.
There's a couple of course, right across the street from the GO station.
Yeah, yeah.
Well located. Location.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, that still applies in our world
Yeah.
in every way.
Yeah. So, wrapping things up here, we had a lot of good discussions today. And so I guess the question is, for our viewers, what are the closing remarks that you would tell people? Like, what do you guys have to say to them?
Well, I would say that windows of opportunity open up very quickly and they shut very fast. And so, if you're looking at real estate, hotels, if you're looking at acquiring or starting a business, there are going to be opportunities out there. Just be prepared to jump through those windows because the really good deals they'll disappear really quick. I think this is nobody wants to go through what we're going through, but with bad times comes creativity and innovation and rethinking how we do business, and typically come out, the really good operators come out stronger, better, and consumers are better off because they're getting a better product, even if it costs a little bit more. And so, stay positive.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think for in our world, people that are actually looking to, and lots of people are actually cutting their teeth and buying commercial real estate.
Wow.
They're looking to buy, they're maybe selling the 1 or 2 rental properties, single family homes that they've got, and they're looking to buy maybe their first 8 or 10 plex or something like that, kind of cut their teeth on a mixed use property or their first commercial multi-res building, commercial multi-res building. And so it's a great opportunity to buy right now because rates are so cheap. We financed a new building in Ottawa, sub 2% money for 10 years.
Wow.
That's great.
It's crazy. Like so yeah. So you can get really good leverage, high leverage at up to 85% financing at sub 2% money. It's really worth looking at it.
What's your phone number, Mark?
1555. And I'll tell you a quick story. We had 2 brothers that were police officers, and they had a bunch of single-family homes. They decided to get into the more of the commercial side, and so they decided they were going to look for an apartment building in GTA. They were Hamilton-based. They looked all over in many markets in Ontario, couldn't find anything. They ended up buying a 43-unit building in Moncton, New Brunswick, for I think $1.7 million.
Wow.
There's no rent control in Moncton, New Brunswick, and I think the tenants probably are less transient than, say, we might be here. So a lot of the tenants have just been there for a long time. So again, moral of the story is, if you are looking to buy, obviously this is a great time to get as much leverage as you can certainly because rates are low, and depending upon the cash flow of the property, if it does cash flow well, then you can maybe get high leverage. And then beyond all that, look maybe a little further afield because you're never sure, where the deals might be and the returns. And so those guys have actually kind of put a little bit of money into the building and kind of bumped the rents up a little bit more. So the returns, even over the last year and a half, 24 months since they've owned it, just gone well. So,
Well, it's good.
That's my 1.5 cents.
So to sum it up, I hear that COVID's caused a lot of disruption, but this disruption brings opportunity, and I heard a lot of that today. So, well, thank you guys extremely very much for sitting here and having this chat. It's wonderful to have you here, and thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Pleasure. Absolutely. Thanks for having us.